All right, shall we? All right, let's get this party started, shall we? And yeah, if you're getting food, sorry. I'm going to try to end by 1 so that if people have a meeting afterwards, they can get out of here for that and doesn't just cut off. So, first of all, I want to thank you for coming. I'm actually honored to have like an audience show up to this because what I realize is, time is all I have in this life, and so for you to give up an hour of your day when you could be doing something else to come here and choose to sit and hear me speak is quite an honor for you to give me that space, and I appreciate that. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I'm slightly underprepared for this presentation since I signed up last week. So if I stumble a bit, you'll know why. And if I pull this off okay, it's because over the years that I've been at the Broad, I've had the gift to present at SoftEng a few times, and by having this forum, I've been able to practice public speaking, and practice is transformative. So I really appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate the existence of SoftEng to give me and us opportunities to talk to a group. I could have rescheduled. The SoftEng committee is not a tyranny, but as I began to put this presentation together, I was originally just going to show off this service that I have been working on a little bit and did another kind of iteration on. But as I was formulating that, it kind of morphed into something a little bit more foundational, and I decided I did really want to share that with you soon. So yeah, with that, I'm going to begin with just a little bit of personal history. At one of my previous jobs, I worked with another engineer on an iPhone app called On the Fly, and this app was like Kayak or some of the Expedia. It did low-fare airfare search. The engineer I worked with was a friend from graduate school. We had already spent years together talking about programming and usability and all the topics that we thought were great. And when we worked together, our conversations were very passionate and fun. We bounced ideas around to about how to extract the last drop of performance out of the iPhone's limited processor so that our users could explore their flight search results without experiencing UI jitter. And we optimized every single aspect of the iPhone's UI or of the app's UI so that, for example, scrolling was smooth. And if it lagged for 10 milliseconds, we would notice and we would fix it. That challenge was rewarding. That challenge was rewarding in itself, but really we were proud of our work because all of that was on behalf of the users that were using our app. It was part craftsmanship and part knowing the annoyance that we felt when the app didn't work super smoothly. So our users may never have actually asked for us to do that, to go to the links. In fact, probably some of them didn't even notice, but some of them did. And we decided that our app was the best one in the space. And I actually at home have a framed article from the New York Times praising our work on that app, which was good. But my pride does not come from that praise. It comes from me focusing every single ounce of my skill and energy as an engineer on serving those users. And I'm most grateful that my skill and the skill of the other engineer I worked with combined to allow us to serve them so well. And this is exactly how I want to feel about the software that I build here at the Broad. So I was just thinking about like what are my foundations for software engineering, and I kind of decided that I should maybe have a personal vision for what I want my software to be. And thinking through that a bit, I came up with this one, which is I want to create joyful experiences by building software that exudes impeccable craftsmanship. Okay, so I want it to be obvious to the users who touch my software that I spent effort on every single detail to shape that into something that's great and that to every extent possible matches their workload. At the Broad, a joyful experience includes the joy of scientific discovery, but the mechanism is exactly the same. Impeccable craftsmanship is incredibly difficult. It's the type of challenge that I want at work, and it's the type of work that I want to hand to my users. So how do we get there? When I started in DSP, I was afraid to talk about my values and about engineering philosophy. I had a feeling it was important because I knew that one of the reasons that the other apps that I developed elsewhere were so successful is because my conversations with my team were centered around how to achieve our goals. We weren't talking about our goals because we'd already talked about those for years and we knew we shared them. So all of our conversations were giving each other ideas and bouncing ideas off each other about how to achieve those goals the best possible way. But I didn't connect that at first, and I didn't connect that when I started in DSP, so I was afraid to talk about them because my fear was that talking about engineering philosophy was a waste of people's time and that they would judge me for that. Now I know better. Engineering a large system involving multiple teams is an incredibly complex endeavor. In the case of what we're building in DSP and the analysis platform, the space that we're searching for good solutions is largely unexplored. So we're going to have to throw away many working solutions before we approach them that have some beauty. And I think the main system, one of the biggest systems we're building right now is Terra, and some of our usability testing does show that like we're not there yet. We have not explored the space enough to have a solution that our users love. Let's see. So in order to explore a lot of solutions, we have to be extremely efficient with our engineering time. And I believe that aligning on our values and aligning on our engineering philosophy will greatly increase our efficiency in the products we build. I tried to come up with an example of where to maybe illustrate this concept. So this is contrived. But suppose I design a component and I choose a dynamic language for implementation. Someone might come along to me and say, without compile time type checking, you're going to have to write a lot more tests to ensure correctness. And I say, but the concision that I get from the dynamic language allows me to understand the system better, and that will mitigate that will mitigate the problem a bit and let me get correctness without so many tests. The trade-offs in this argument that we're having are complex, and even if one of us concedes the point, nobody wins. That is not a conversation that gets us to learning very quickly, and so we end up talking a lot and not necessarily coming to strong conclusions. So let's say instead we talk about values first. I share that my goal is to get a usable system in front of users as quickly as possible so I can feedback and iterate. And you tell me that compile time type checking is the way to go. The difference between those two conversations is huge. Now you're my ally. And now you're the source of some information that might help me reach my goals. Instead of us kind of starting with, I don't know if you're right, and we're butting heads a little bit, I'll pull the information out of you because it's exciting to me. Because you are you have already stated that you're trying to help me achieve my goals, which is trying to help my users out by delivering as quickly as possible. So I'm going to pull the information from you. And so regardless of the outcome, our conversation will be more productive and engaging. I believe that this topic needs to become of our regular conversational practice. What is the goal first, and then what is the solution? And I think we can help seed this conversation through our documentation practice. And that is why today I'm going to just present to you this, this design exercise that I went through to create the second version of this service, which I will also describe. And I'm going to try to do that by going from vision through philosophy, then to my what that led to in terms of the requirements that I was trying to achieve. So since I'm writing this design, first thing I do is I point out the philosophy that I'm trying to follow through the rest of this design. So I'm going to start with my philosophy for this, this project. So usability is everything. It's the most important thing to me. Making a system that works really well for people is the core of my work. I also believe that trial and error is the most effective approach to creating usable software. It's the only approach that I've ever known that has worked well. As far as I can tell, it is impossible to design something perfectly up front. So I prioritize productivity. Productivity meaning my ability to deliver quickly iterations of the software. I want to choose the tools I use very carefully and become an expert in those tools, because if I'm having to learn a tool or fiddle with it, or if it gets in my way, that's energy that is lost that could be spent on me extracting whatever last drop it is on the way to creating the best possible experience for my users. And then complexity kills productivity. So anytime I can simplify the system, I'm going to try to do that because that is going to reduce the requirements on the system and give me more options for iterating quickly, give me more options for other things, which I'll talk about. So relentless simplicity is how I think about it. All right. So I want to create a joyful experience for these users in this application. And by the way, the next slide is describing the application, so don't worry, it's coming. So the joyful experience I'm trying to create are for people who are trying to link their ERA Commons account to their Terra account. So the goal of this service is pretty small. It's to allow users to basically log into ERA Commons and be able to associate that login with their Terra account so that those can be linked, and then they can use data and things like that that require an ERA Commons account. But there are other users. There are other users that are just important. People who wish to use this service to allow their users to link to their accounts. So I'm writing this service, but there are other users. Those include developers in the analysis platform that want to use this service to actually get that done in Terra. So they are users, those engineers who want to use this service to get the job done that it's trying to do. Those users I want to bring joy. I want to bring them joy too. I want to make their experience also as usable as I possibly can. And then the last set of users I want to serve are people who write and deploy Shibboleth services. So right now that's me. And I would like to make my experience awesome when I'm working on this. And when I hand it off to other engineers, I want their experience to be awesome. So I want to make it easy for the people who are trying to use this to integrate into their service. And I just wanted to say that in reality, the bar is much lower. To do a handshake with the ERA Commons identity provider system, you must get support from NIH's ERA Commons login support team. And you might be surprised to hear that contacting this team does not unlock an overflowing well of support and expertise from the NIH Commons ERA Commons team. you're kind of on your own. So all I really have to do is make it easier to integrate with my service than it is to deal with the ENRH ERA Commons support team. Like if I just come in under that bar, we're in theory good because there's less red tape. But this goal does not exude impeccable craftsmanship. So it does not flex my skills as an engineer. So I want to aim higher. In fact, I want to shoot for the theoretical maximum of user joy because that is what brings me joy. All right. So with that, I'm going to talk just real quickly about version 1 of this service, which is the one I'm replacing. So the requirements, number 1, don't make other people talk to the ERA Commons support team because that's painful. So the least I can possibly do is eliminate that pain point for people who want to allow ERA Commons. Does anyone now not know what this service does or is still vague on it? Okay. Do you have any questions?
I guess I just have one question. What is the ERA Commons like?
Okay. What is the ERA Commons? The ERA Commons is a kind of a data holding branch of the NIH. So if you get an ERA Commons account, you have access to some data that is stored within the ERA Commons.
Okay.
So so researchers want ERA Commons accounts, and then we can give them, Tara can give them access to data if they have an ERA Commons account.
Just a little more.
All right. So second goal is don't make other people learn SAML. So the type of authentication mechanism used for you to sign into ERA Commons or use them as an identity provider, it's called SAML. I don't know what that stands for. I found it very difficult to learn. There seems to be a lot of pieces to it. So if it's possible, then when I build the system, what I want to do is see if I can remove that burden from anyone else who wants to use this system. So instead of like pushing SAML down or kicking the can down the road, I'd like to be able to see if I can come up with something else. And then, of course, minimize the coordination burden for integrating with my service. So I'd like it if anyone can use this without having to talk to me. Because if they have to talk to me, that adds an order of magnitude of calendar time for their implementation, and they might not have the energy to experiment with it to see if it works well for them. So I really want to reduce the coordination burden so that anyone who might want to use this can experiment with it easily, and then with those experiments decide if they want to use it for their work. So what was the, go ahead.
I was just asking, does it mean you're copying the data over to Terra Workspace or use it directly there?
I'll get into that. Okay. So what was the original implementation? The deployment model was the standard for Firecloud at the time. So it was Jenkins deploying to Google Cloud VM. The secrets were stored in vaults, and I'll talk about what the secrets are. It used the lib apache2 mod shib2 Apache module to actually do the SAML thing, the SAML exchange, the SAML handshake. And that was what was recommended by the ERA Commons IT support team as how to do it. So this is where the original name of Shibboleth came from. Shibboleth is, I believe, a product. Well, Shibboleth is kind of a Hebrew word for secret, but Shibboleth is a product that helps companies do SAML authentication. I believe this is one that they actually use, and then they recommend that if you want to integrate with them, to try out this Apache module. So knowing nothing about how to actually implement this, that seemed like a good approach, the one they recommend. It was kind of painful to configure, but eventually it worked. So at the end of this exchange, what I get back into my service is the ERA Commons username, meaning I get a username that that because of the Shibboleth module, because of this Apache module, I can prove the user has signed in with this ERA Commons username. Okay, so that's what I get back. I get their ERA Commons username. So what I did in the original version of this is I wrapped that ERA Commons username in a JSON web token. Anyone unfamiliar at all with JSON web token? Okay, great. Some. Okay, so what that allowed me to do was wrap that username in a token, which then I could sign and provide to anyone else. And now the holder of that token basically is holding proof that they were able to sign in with that ERA Commons username. Okay, so the way, yeah.
Was there a preference for shared secrets?
I'll get into that. Great question. Okay, so it was signed with a shared secret. What that what this ends up allowing is, because a user in Terra can go through this flow and get this JWT. Now the Terra UI possesses both their Google Access token, because they've signed into Terra, and this JWT that asserts their username, their ERA Commons username. The UI provides that to the platform, and that is how we can link those things two together. Okay, so we have their access token, we have this assertion that's proven because it's cryptographically signed, and so we can safely link these two accounts and say, this Google user was able to sign into ERA Commons with this username. I can allow access to data to this Google user that would be accessible to this ERA Commons user. So that's how, that's the mechanism behind the system works. And then the other thing I did in the original implementation, which I was happy, which turned out well, is I implemented the full example flow on the production system. And what that means is you didn't have to integrate with the system. You could visit the service itself, this service, and it would give you a web page that allows you to walk through the entire flow. So it was providing an example integration, an example of using the service as its documentation. So I'll cover that a little bit more. All right. So how did I go into version 2 of this? What are the requirements for version 2? Why did I even embark on doing a second iteration of this thing? First, that it's fixable at all. The existing version is atrophied. We don't maintain the Jenkins deployment for this service very well. Fixing it requires SSHing onto a Google VM and trying to fiddle with things in production. It's not great. And then there was a security bug I also wanted to be able to fix. So that's those are the the instigators for me embarking on this journey of a version 2 of this system. Since I'm going through this effort anyway, how can I increase joy? How can I apply my engineering philosophy to this second version? Version 1, in terms of the joy of Terra users, goes down a few times each year for a day or so, and that's because of a timing bug that exists in the system. And as I said, fixing requires SSHing into the VM. So the least I can do is have version 2 go down less often and make deployment easier, so I can fix it more easily, and we can put more in source control and everything else. So that's really my main concerns for the people that are actually interfacing with the system through Terra. For system integrators, that is people that I would encourage to use this service, like the engineers on Terra that I want to try this out. Version 1 had shared secrets to verify JSON web tokens. And the dev and production environments pointed to the ERA Commons dev and production environments. So it turns out that ERA Commons is just like almost every other engineering organization I've ever been at, where their production environment is like, they're on top of it, it's pretty well maintained, it's working great. Their dev environment is not really getting a lot of attention and kind of goes down. So that means that maybe that's going to be working and maybe that's not going to be working, and maybe it's going to impede our development and maybe it's not. Once upon a time, I was minding my own business and walking around and somehow came across the information that you can sign JWTs with a private key and allow it to be verified with a public key. I don't know if this was available when I first implemented this service, but either way, I discovered this, and that's a case where I was excited about technology. I'm not big on technology. I don't really. I like, bulletproof, boring things mostly. But I was excited about this because I knew that I was going to be able to apply it to reducing friction for people who wanted to integrate with my service. And so it was incredibly exciting for me to learn that I could use this, and I'll show you how I do. Let's see, version 2 has a mock flow to support development environments and improve transparency in documentation. So I'm gonna show that really quickly. While that loads up, I can present this screen, right? Okay. So this is version 2 of this service. I don't have a designer, so this is what you're going to get. Yeah, it looks great. So when you go to when you're integrating with this, you don't send people to the homepage. You send them to a URL that starts the process. Yeah. Oh, zoom in, sure. Great, thanks for that suggestion. You send them to a URL. So when you go to the homepage on the service, it says, here are some example flows you can go through so you can learn how to do this integration and how it functions. So I'm showing, all right, this is the thing you need to figure out, the return URL. So I've listed it here. This is what it looks like in this case. This is what it looks like if you were to URL encode it. I've seen people kind of not quite get that piece of the process, so I'm just making it explicit. The development, if you go through the development flow, you'll be using this key. And if you go through the production flow, you'll be using this key. Again, these are publicly available, right? The beauty is that that I no longer have to share a secret. You don't have to coordinate with us to share a secret. Instead, the keys that you will use for verifying the service are immediately available to you. So if I start with the development flow, I can put any username in here and sign in. Go ahead. All right. So so this is the development flow. I sign in, and then this page is telling me that the sign-in was successful, and it's describing how it's going to construct the JSON web token that it's going to then send. So this is the token after it's been signed and encoded, and then in this flow, it's going to send you along to the return URL. Okay, and in this case, the return URL is still on my application, but this would be on your application. And so if I go to this, this is an example return page. It's pulling apart the JSON web token and showing what's inside. And then there's code on this to verify the JSON web token and tell you whether it passed or failed verification. So in this case, the verification with the dev public key passed, and with the prod public key failed. So as expected. And then I can go through this same flow with production. I can even sign in with my ERA Commons account. I'll get back to that example return page, and it'll show that the prod key actually, in this case, was able to verify the token. So this is the documentation. It's demonstrating the flow in what I hope is a way that would allow an implementer to really get a feel for it and then be able to implement it. The code is all open source as well, so that helps. And we're back. Great. Okay. That is that. And then lastly, the users that want to bring joy are us, so me, and the team that will taking over this. So one thing I was able to do in this new version is, this was suggested, David Ahn suggested this to me like a long time ago about looking into libraries that might be able to implement SAML. So I was able to find one, a JavaScript library to implement SAML. That allowed me to eliminate Apache and the coupling between them, which, because of the simplicity, allows a lot more deployment options. I was deploying it, it had to be deployed before as coupled Docker or coupled Docker containers in a VM. Now I can deploy, because it's a single application in JavaScript, I can deploy it to App Engine, which has some advantages over that. And then I also moved the secrets, for example, the private keys, to cloud storage instead of Vault. And what that allows is, if a new engineer wants to work on this system, I give them access to the cloud project, the Google Cloud project, the Shibboleth project, and now they have everything they need. I don't have to also try to find other things to give them access to, like Vault or like anything else. So it just streamlines and simplifies the onboarding process for a new engineer. If you know me at all, you might wonder one aspect of this new system, which is why I moved from ClojureScript to JavaScript. So the original version was written in ClojureScript on Node. That was the business logic in front or behind Apache. And this new version is written in JavaScript. So Clojure is definitely a simpler and more powerful language than JavaScript in terms of my experience and the languages I've used. Really, any developer I've seen that becomes proficient in Clojure is more productive, in my opinion, than they would be in any other language, or at least any other language that I've known. ClojureScript requires Java and a compiler. So that means that if you want to get your development environment set up for a ClojureScript project, you have to have Java, and you have to compile the code. So now we're adding complexity, right? Instead of JavaScript, which targets Node directly and doesn't have to be compiled, we're adding a compilation step, and that reduces transparency. It makes debugging a little bit more difficult. And we're also adding a dependency. So now you also have to install Java on your machine, and maybe it's 1.8. Were you working on 1.7? Maybe it's 1.9. I don't know. I have to solve that problem. Now I don't have to solve that problem. So I'm reducing the complexity of the development environment too. One thing I've noticed when I'm converting between ClojureScript and JavaScript is data structure conversion can be a performance bottleneck. So if we look at the other languages I know quite well, C and Perl, C was back in my college days. Lisp was my first job, Objective-C to do iPhone app development, Java to do Android development, Python to do my startup, and then JavaScript here at the Broad. JavaScript is of those languages that I've programmed in professionally and have had mentorship with, so I feel confident in. JavaScript is the least crippled in comparison to Clojure. So it's a good choice, or I think it's a good choice. And I also appreciate Node's asynchronous architecture for problems like this. So that is that. So I was trying to figure out, after going through all of this, if I could summarize and give you some takeaways. So I think one of the biggest ones is demand context. And by that I mean, I would like you to support me when I'm creating a design document, for example, by demanding that I put in the engineering philosophy that I'm going for with this design. So demand that from me, hold my feet to the fire, remind me to do it, and I will give you the same support by demanding that from you. I'm going to ask that when I see a design and when I'm reviewing a design for something, I'm going to ask to see philosophy in terms of what are your main goals in terms of what you're trying to achieve by this document. I think context is very important. When I say bring in the user, because one thing I noticed when I was developing an iPhone app is we didn't get a lot of feedback from our users, but they were like right there in the room because all of our energy was spent trying to make their experience better. And we were the users. So, you know, we can use intuition to kind of to understand what their needs are, and that's a way to bring them into the conversation, even if they're not physically there. And then joy in work. The reason that I do this, the reason that I push so hard on usability and I push so hard on getting a unified engineering philosophy and on doing my best work and on trying to build products that exude craftsmanship is because that is what brings me joy. And we spend so much time at work. I spend, we spend 40 hours a week here. Like, it is critical that this is, that to the best of my ability, this is something that brings me joy every day. And this is what brings me joy. And so it's important for that reason alone. All right. I had an appendix where I was going to show off how I built a REPL in App Engine. So that I could iterate very quickly on learning App Engine, because if you want to bring good experience to users, you have to become an expert in your tools, right? So I wanted to really pick apart App Engine, and I kind of built a REPL for that. But I'd like to end instead to let people run off to 1 o'clock things that they may have. So I'm not going to show that. Maybe that'll be a topic for a future talk.